It's been a while, but this will be the fifth installment. Well, the fifth video, but the third subject of a swearing session. So this one, I want to kind of get into more of, the meat and potatoes of the UK 82, I guess, scene, really. Like the bands that would have been either opening or like the middle of the bill for, like, if you go see The Exploited back in 82, 83, like the opening bands, the middle bands, like these are the bands that really, like, kept the scene afloat at that time. These are the bands that might not have necessarily been on tour constantly or may not have toured at all. The guys you would see hanging out around town. These were not superstars, but they were definitely the glue that held this scene together at the time. So with No Future and Riot City, they were kind of the first tier down from, the Secret Records, the Rondelet Records, these kind of sort of indie labels that had punk bands on them but weren't exclusively punk. And then No Future and Riot City were the rung below that, where they were all punk, basically just catered to the second wave of punks and skinheads. And then below that you had bands or labels that put out bands that were they're generally like more obscure. In my mind, labels like Beat the System, Rot Records, Pax Records, Inferno, that just off the top of my head, these are the next rung down in terms of distribution, just general popularity. And nothing really super expensive at this point, but definitely there's just less of it in circulation at that time, and even less so today. So with that, we'll start. This one is going to be Beat the System. Beat the System is an interesting label. They were started by a guy named Barry Isman, aka Barry Lights, and at this point there's kind of a little I guess people kind of have a little more of like a negative view of Barry Lights as opposed to the guys who did Riot City and No Future, some of which I think isn't really fair. I mean, there's, if you read any of the UK 82 books, a lot of the bands that were on Beat the System kind of look back at Barry as if he was like ripping them off and stole a bunch of money off them, and they never got paid for their releases. Accusations of that nature, which I think is a little bit unfair. I mean, he may have done that, but in all reality, the only reason we know a lot of these bands exist is because he kind of did all that. So, and it's not like, these guys are missing out on millions of dollars, sorry to say, it definitely doesn't make it right. I'm not saying it's right, but it's definitely like one of those things where it's like, at the time, kind of be pissed off, but at this point, it's kind of let bygones be bygones. I don't know, where he's at now, but he's definitely not living large because of, these 7 inches from the 80s. But I mean, that's just my opinion. Think what you want. I don't really care. It's just a retrospective video. So Beat the System came out of, in a similar way to Riot City, kind of had the whole Heartbeat thing. Barry Lights was doing a label called Lightbeat, which was kind of just a generic, I guess, indie rock, new wave kind of label. And this, as the second wave of punk started taking shape, he either took notice for just general, just because he liked the stuff, or some might say, again, for financial reasons, he took interest to it, and he decided to make his own imprint, especially for the punk band. So that would end up being Beat the System. And he actually ran a record shop, so I believe that the record label actually came out of his shop. So the first thing he actually did was a Fitz release. It wasn't this one, it was a cassette, and it was their demo cassette, and they kind of brought him the demo and he put it out. He kind of distributed it. So it's not really a Beat the System release. It's kind of, and it was substantially earlier too. This was in 1980. This record came out in 1981, and this is technically the first vinyl release on Beat the System, and this is also the Fitz debut record. You said we never make it. So here, I'll show this. And it's very typical of punk sleeves at that time. I mean, just with the cut and paste, handwritten, photocopied sleeve. And this has that injection molded labels that was Ride City was known for. And this was actually done by that same French manufacturing company there that made in France. And this has actually that you can see in the reflection, that lamination that peels quite, and you can see it actually, the whole sleeve is kind of curved, and it's in, yeah, this stuff just did not age that well. It's not really flaking off of this one a little bit here, but yeah, this lamination stuff is just really didn't stand the test of time. This is actually the second press. The first press was a gatefold sleeve, and it's pretty tough to find and expensive, and I only have this one. I'll probably get it eventually, but to be honest with you, this record isn't too great. It's very primitive, and that's not just me saying that. I mean, if you read some of the books and stuff, the band themselves say, yeah, they should have probably waited a little bit to develop as a band before they put a record out, because this is very, yeah, this is this is a pretty rough one. Like Odd Bod Mod is on here. Odd Bod Mod, listen to me, I got something to say. It's just really, I mean, it has a charm to it, but it's out of tune. It's definitely what you think a band's first material would sound like. And this band actually would go on to do a lot more, but this would be their only Beat the System release. So they kind of were put out by and discovered by Barry Lights, and then they immediately left Beat the System, and this would be their first and only release on Beat the System, and they would move to the previously mentioned Rondelet Records. And I'm just going to show a couple of the Fitz's later releases here, because I kind of shit on that other one, but these records are just outstanding. Like, these guys developed in an extremely short period of time into one of my favorite UK82 bands. And by the time the album came out, and especially this later 7-inch, which we'll talk about in a second, they really, I mean, it doesn't sound like the same band at all. It sounds like two completely different bands. So after they left Beat the System, they went to Rondelet. Rondelet had other bands like Special Duties, Antipasti, The Threats, and other non-punk stuff as well. They had some metal on there. I think Witchfind was on there. They had some rockabilly. There was other genres on Rondelet as well. But this would be their second record, and this was on Rondelet Records. But if you notice here, it says produced by Fitz and Barry Lights, and even the way the sleeve is set up, it looks like something, especially as we start getting later into Beat the System, just the aesthetic of this, really, it looks like something that was on Beat the System. So I'm not sure if these records were planned to be on Beat the System. And the same is true with this Last Laugh. This actually came out after the album, I believe. But again, just the way it's set up with the cut and paste, it's not anything like was on Rondelet, really. Rondelet had kind of their own thing for most of the bands, but the Fitz stuff really looks like it still was on Beat the System right up through the album. And yeah, these two records are outstanding. I love these. The album also on it says right here, produced by Barry Lights. So he had a hand in this. I think maybe he was still managing this band. I don't know any of the inner workings of it, but this handwritten stuff here, this is very Rondelet. This is how the Special Duties album is too. It's like, someone just wrote all the stuff out. It's got a lyric insert with the Fitz skull logo. Yeah, this is an outstanding album. This is their debut album. And then, quite interestingly, after this album and this 7-inch, they ended up on Crass's Corpus Christi Records, and which is really, you wouldn't think they would, especially once you hear this. This is very polished. It's still definitely punk, but it's much more polished than even these records were, and it's really out of place on Corpus Christi. And this is I think the only record they did with them. They went after this, which I'm not going to talk about those records. They did more through the mid 80s. I might just do a whole video on the Fits eventually, but yeah, this is just really out of place on that label. And apparently they went up to Crass's Commune and Burning Britain. They just said it was an odd experience. They were nice, but it was just odd. And yeah, I think actually Knox produced a lot of these too. I don't know. Knox from the Vibe, yeah, produced by Knox. Yep. So I think he did the album, maybe as well. I'm not sure. Let's see. No, it just says Barry Lights. Well, I know Knox was involved in producing this band. So yeah, this is I would say this is an underrated band. They don't really have the cult following that a lot of other UK82 bands of this caliber have, for whatever reason. But I mean, I love this band. Yeah, so that's the Fits. Oh, I'll also mention there is this, which is sort of a compilation. This is from the 90s on Get Back Records. This has, I don't know if it's the full album. Get Back's a little weird. They have a tendency to put out compilations like this that are sort of they kind of give the vibe that it's everything, but they're missing a couple of songs. So yeah, this has songs from You Said We'd Never Make It, The Straps, Burial, Think for Yourself, 7-inch, The Last Laugh, and the album. But I believe there's a couple songs off each that are missing. This is pretty cool to have, though. You know, it comes with this little insert with some lyrics and stuff on it. I think this is the first Fits record I was able to find. This is from 96, something like that, 98 maybe, I don't know. 90s, early 2000s maybe, I don't know. But this is cool to have. So that is the Fits. And that was the first, this was the first release on Beat the System. And I also want to mention before we move on, the catalog numbers on Beat the System are very confusing because they're not like how No Future was all, the singles were Oi 1, 2, 3, 4. They numbered the releases sequentially for each band. So this is Fit 1, and that's the only catalog number for the Fits. And then the next band would have their own catalog number specifically numbered for them. So it's really confusing to know exactly when these releases came out. Thankfully, in the book that was done by New Rose Publishing, which I've shown in the other videos, this is the sort of encyclopedia of their second wave UK punk bands. There's a section here about Beat the System, and that's where I got a lot of the information for this from. And this, they actually went through the trouble of organizing and cataloging the releases by in order of their actual release. So that was super helpful. Yeah, so this first one, that was March of 1981. So after March of 1981, it was pretty much radio silence until January of 82, when they did another cassette, which I don't collect cassettes, so I don't have that to show, but it was the Antisocial demo. It was a band, we're going to talk about their vinyl in detail in a minute, but that was the next release in January of 82. And then also in January of 82, they did their second vinyl record, and that was also the start of really the label started moving forward at this point. So January 82. January of 82 is a band, we've actually talked about this record before. One Way System, they would go on to be, I would say they're definitely in like the top 5 most popular UK82 bands of this period. You know, with Exploited, Discharge, EBH, One Way System's like right up there with them in terms of songwriting and just everything. But this is their very first release in January 82, Stab the Judge. There's actually two pressing variations of this. This is the first one. The second one will say no entry, I believe, down here. That's the second pressing. I don't know how soon after it came out from this one, but yeah. So this is and also interesting. Tez McDonald here. He was actually also the drummer of the Fits. So I believe he was in both bands simultaneously. So this is kind of similar to the Fitz first 7-inch in that it's much more primitive than a lot of their later releases. This is much better than the Fitz first release, but also One Way System's later releases were light years ahead of this one. And at the same time that this came out, they were also featured on this, which we've also talked about previously, the Country Fit for Heroes. They were on here. They were the last track on the first side with Jerusalem. So that's also kind of a little unusual, is that between this and that, which are their first two releases, which also both of these came out in the same month in January of '82, but two of their most popular songs, Stab the Judge and Jerusalem, were on their first two releases that still to this day are probably, when many of you think of One Way System, you might think of one of those two songs. So yeah, there's also, I should mention, there's a Visionary vinyl repress of this that came out in the 90s. That the Visionary stuff isn't trying to fool you, but it just looks very old. So a lot of people just are like, oh, that's definitely original. And yeah, I actually, in my earlier days of collecting, I had a number of the Visionary records thinking they were original. So actually, I'm gonna do more of a deep dive in One Way System in this video because, again, they're definitely the most popular band to come off of Beat the System. And these are that was their first 7-inch. This is their second 7-inch. This came out on Anagram in '82. A couple months after that one. I don't remember the exact month that this came out. But this, they had a new drummer on this, Tom Couch, and he's one of the, still to this day, I believe, one of the longest standing members of One Way System. So this is his first release with the band. And this was a noticeable improvement in all. I mean, every single, the singing, the guitar, the drums, the production, this is definitely leaps and bounds ahead of that. And then by the time of these three 7-inches, they were even leaps and bounds ahead of this one. So these are, and here's Jerusalem again, which got its own single. And the B-side on this, Jackie Was a Junkie, is like one of the top second wave UK punk songs. Like in my mind, I love that song, and Jerusalem's great too. Then there's this one, Come On Feel the Noise, which is actually a Slade cover. A lot of people think, I think it was Quiet Riot that covered that, but it's actually a Slade song. But a lot of people are like, why did they cover Quiet Riot? Like, they both covered Slade. Yeah, definitely not my favorite by them. The B-side on this is Breakin' In, which was on their album All Systems Go. And then this is their last 7-inch, not last single, but well, sort of. This is their last. This came out alongside the second album, and this is another great one. The cover's kind of getting a little weird, but this don't be fooled. This is straight up the UK '82 style that they were known for. As far as their albums go, they had 2 albums in their classic era. So these are the 2. This is All Systems Go and Writing on the Wall. These are like UK '82 essentials in my mind. And this comes with a lyric insert. And you can even see there's 2 of their 7-inches on the inner sleeve there. Yeah, this is one of the best UK '82 albums, and I have to say this is also an unusual band in the sense that they had 2 amazing albums back to back, and these came out both in '83. Like, they knocked both of these albums out really quick within a couple months of each other. This is actually the Japanese press of this, so this was a little later in '84. It has the OBI here. Actually, to be honest with you guys, I hate these. I think it just kind of distracts from the original artwork. So if I ever go for Japanese presses, I usually try to actually find the ones missing the OBI because they're cheaper and cooler. This actually comes with an interesting, it has all the lyrics translated into Japanese on it. And then this was the original insert. I think this was an inner sleeve like the other one. And they just kind of made it into a fold-out thing with the Japanese info on one side. It has the lineup here. And then the English stuff on the other side. Yeah, and this is funny. This is like a copy of some like complaint that they received. They put it on the insert of the record that they were a noise nuisance is being filed against you. So that's pretty funny. And this, I think, comes with, now this one doesn't have it, but most of these Japanese ones came with a poster of Cal from Discharge. They all came with the same poster, which I'm sure I have a couple copies of it in other records, which I'll probably show in a different video, but yeah. These Japanese, the VAT pressings are sought after because they sound incredible. And they're definitely a heavier weight than a lot of the UK ones at the time. So yeah, that is One Way System. Also, I will throw in this. This was their last record that came out after that second album, Writing on the Wall. This came out, and this was a little bit of a departure. And this is the kind of the record. This is technically a single also. This came out in a 12-inch and a 7-inch. Yeah, you could see they just were kind of... The songs aren't bad. The production's very odd. You can tell they were trying to go that Abrasive Wheels direction, and it just really didn't kind of work here. The songs are okay. You know, it's whatever. Very not expensive. If you find this one, definitely no. This is definitely past their prime, in my opinion. This also came out sort of recently, and I've shown this in the other video too. This is like a singles demos collection. So this has everything that we kind of talked about. All the 7 inches come with a poster and all that stuff. I'll show it, even though I showed it in another video. So yeah, this picture is is probably the most used One Way System picture. It's on everything. Okay, so with that, we will move on. So that was One Way System. That was One Way System with Way 1. That was the catalog number for that. So the third 7-inch, or third release, is this one, Made in England by Antisocial. And Antisocial is one of my favorite bands from this era. Two skinheads, two punks. Well, they kind of went back and forth, some of them. The guitar player is kind of like the skinhead in the leather jacket here, which was definitely a thing at the time, the whole skunk thing, which would kind of be considered a no-no these days, I guess, but who cares? These guys were there back then and they did what they wanted. So kind of hate that when people try to like put modern inject like the modern ways into these old bands. But so Antisocial were from Blackpool, as were which is where the label was from. I'm not sure if I mentioned that, but yeah, Beat the System was from Blackpool. Antisocial, they had the demo put out a little bit before this. This was their first official release though, and this is 4 songs. I mean, they're 4 out of 4 on this one. This is one of my favorite UK82 records, period. And the back is pretty cool. There's just a bunch of alternate versions of the front cover and just little, you know, cool little Easter eggs to hunt for in the back. So Antisocial actually took their name from maybe the biggest band to ever come from Blackpool, and also the most controversial band to come from Blackpool, and that is this band. And that, which I'm sure need no introduction, so some of you are probably either turning this video off right now, or you're grown-ups and you can handle this stuff. So this was their second release, and it was the song Antisocial, and that was definitely an anthem at this time, especially if you were a skinhead in the early 80s or a punk. You probably own this, knew about this, listened to this. Now, obviously a different story, but I don't really care. So, anyway, back to Antisocial. So there was only one original press of this, and all the Antisocial stuff, which we're going to talk about as we go forward, has been bootlegged multiple times throughout the 90s, because they are, I would say they're probably the only real Oi skinhead band on this label, and they're kind of a cult band if you're into Oi, which now is considered two different, is considered separate from punk, but at this time, the punk and Oi stuff was really the same. They were definitely two different subcultures, but they were really under the same umbrella in terms of these kinds of bands. So in the 90s, there was a bunch of bootlegs of this, but all of those have a much flimsier cover. The original press is more of a card cover, and there's also, you can tell a little bit by some of the cutouts in the sleeve. I think some of them open on the side. The 90s ones, there's also a bunch of different color ones. There's a version of this that was on white vinyl, red vinyl, and pink vinyl. And those are all various bootlegs from, bootlegs or reissues. There was, I think that the official reissues were done by Knockout Records, but they look almost identical to some of the bootlegs. It's just a mess trying to collect some of these Antisocial records. But usually the end-all be-all is, again, the stiffer card cover, and they say, I believe they say something in the, I believe they say Jeff in the runouts. I don't know if I'll be able to get a picture of the actual runouts. Oh, right there. Yeah, you can see it says Jeff in the runout. Yep, right there. So that is the original press. Has those, I believe. So if it's in any color variation, it's a later 90s reissue bootleg. And if it's black, you got to really do your homework and try to figure out which one is the original. I'm sure they're sold interchangeably on eBay and all that stuff all the time. This was also reissued in 2016 on Evil Records, but that one's really easy to tell because the contrast on the cover varies between green, red, and blue. So they really, there's no, what you're getting with those. And probably a better option and cheaper option for anyone that just wants a copy of this. So that was June of 1982. Antisocial made in England, Social 1. Okay, moving on. This is another one of my favorites. This label is just, I love everything that's on it. So this is Death Sentence, Death and Pure Destruction. This was Death 1 is the catalog number, and this came out in July of 1982. And there's only one press of this. And this one actually is on more of a paper. This is on more of a paper material than the other one. And there's a bunch of cool pictures on the back. Yeah, this is a cult classic for sure, UK82 record. For more reasons than one. This is definitely, they took a lot of influence off of Discharge. And there's actually, I think a lot of people say that this is the first diss reference like that is now way overdone in D-Beat. Everything's diss, that, the other. But this is Death and Pure Destruction by many accounts is the first Discharge play, and they actually confirmed that in this book that was released recently, which would finally shed some light on this band, because they were kind of, I think they're definitely were one of those mystery bands that no one knew anything really about for many years until this book came out. And this is the first time I was ever really able to, and I actually have it bookmarked here, Death Sentence. They have a whole little write-up on them with, it's like 4 pages long, and it actually has another unseen picture of them that I had never seen before. And it turns out the singer was a skinhead, which is very interesting. You could kind of tell on this picture. I mean, he's got his bleachers on, but he's got a leather on, so it's, again, it's like the Antisocial. It's like, where's the line? But according to this, he was a skinhead, so, which is a little, again, odd, because this band does not sound anything like what skinheads would be involved with. There's no chant, sing-along, like, melody. This is straight Discharge territory, but yeah, these guys, this is their only release. There is a demo that they put out on cassette the year before this in 1981, and supposedly there's going to be a 12-inch I actually talked to one of the guys who's involved in putting that out. So there is going to be a 12-inch that's going to have the demo and this 7-inch on it eventually. I really wanted to wait to put that in, but apparently it's just going to take a little while longer because they really want to make sure it's going to be right. And they actually put out a Great Disorder 12-inch, I think, last year, which it's called Summer of '81 Records. And yeah, they did really good work on that Disorder 12-inch. So they're going to be doing this band, so I can't wait for that. Yeah, so there's only one original press of this, but this was finally reissued in 2020 on Bomb All Records. So if you really, this isn't super expensive, but this is definitely, you know, north of $50 US for a copy of this these days. So if you just want a copy, that reissue is probably your best bet. So that is Death Sentence, Death and Pure Destruction. Okay, so now we're moving on to the next release, which is another Antisocial record, sort of. Antisocial, Too Many People. This was September 1982, and the catalog number is Fit 2, which is kind of weird because you're like, well, why does this have a Fit's catalog number? But it's Antisocial. So it's the band Antisocial, but they have the singer of the Fits, Mick Crudge. He sings on this, and he shares the vocal duties with Sid, who was the singer on Antisocial. This would actually be the last record with Sid singing for Antisocial, but that's a story for in a minute. Yeah, so this is interesting. Also, it's the wrong 2. Should be TOO, which I guess was a kind of like a little joke that this label was doing, that Barry was doing. He would put spelling errors on the sleeves on purpose, supposedly. And this is another one that has a lot of bootlegs floating around that are very tough to tell. So there's only this one original press with the card. Again, the way to tell with these is more the material that the sleeve is made of. This one is one of the hardest ones to tell the difference. I mean, I've held this one next to the later one from Knockout Records, and it's, I mean, almost identical other than the material. There is a gray vinyl version that was done later on, so the reissue. So there's a version that's on gray. That one's a reissue. No way to mistake that. But then the black one is where it gets tough. So you're just gonna have to do your homework on that one and try to tell from pictures. Try to get pictures of it before you buy it and see if it just has that little, see that little sheen to it. Maybe you can try to tell if this is more of a card. Okay, so not really much to talk about with this one. This, I don't think, was even intended really to come out. I think this was actually recorded at the same time as their other 7-inch, they just kind of were jamming. Yeah, it's cool to have, but I don't really listen to this one too much. Okay, so the next one is an interesting one. This is actually their first 12-inch on Beat the System, and this is a compilation. So this either features bands that were on Beat the System, or bands that we're going to talk about. So there's a little bit of a spoiler for about half the bands on here, but there's only one press of this. This came out in November 1982. The catalog number was Anarchy 1, and this is, I think this is every band that appeared on Beat the System appears on this, just about. So the sleeve isn't too interesting. Some of the stuff on here is on the other releases. So the One Way System stuff, the Antisocial stuff, and the Death Sentence stuff is all on the previous releases. But the the fifth songs on here are taken off of that cassette that we mentioned earlier. But the External Youth song, or the External Menace songs, the Chaotic Youth, and the Uproar songs on this are exclusive. So these are the only places you're going to find these songs for the most part, apart from like singles collections and stuff like that. So this is definitely cool to have. It also mentions Dave, the lead singer from Death Sentence, who we just talked about. He was in jail by the time this came out, so this is dedicated to him. And he, I believe, unfortunately passed away not too long ago, so R.I.P. Dave. But okay, so that is Total Anarchy. Definitely, I like this compilation a lot. Even though it's kind of a little bit redundant, it's kind of cool to just hear a little bit of each band that's on this label. So from this, the next one is Uproar. So Uproar's debut was on that compilation with them, but the next record, this was Rebel Youth. This was released in December 1982, and it's Raw 1. And an interesting thing with all these Uproar records, there are no reissues, bootlegs, or anything. There's only the original presses, which is interesting. But again, the aesthetic of this, you can really tell the Beat the System look to how this is put together. But this is one of my all-time favorites as well. As far as the bands go too on here, this is one of my favorite UK2 bands of all time. Just a legendary band. Yeah, but no reissues or anything like that. Okay, so, and then similarly, the next release is External Menace from Scotland. They were also, their first release was the Total Anarchy compilation. This is the Youth of Today EP, so this came out in February 1983. The catalog number is Menace 1. These guys were from Scotland, as I just mentioned. And these guys are probably my favorite band on Beat the System, and probably one of my favorite punk bands of all time. You can see them there. I mean, these guys, the amount of material that these guys released versus how great they were as a band in the 80s, it just boggles my mind that these guys were not on, like with One Way System, on Anagram, or at least on No Future or something. I mean, they're just the songwriting and the talent that they had and still have. They still play, and they actually broke up in the 80s and continued all through the 90s, which we'll get into that in a little bit. But yeah, there's actually an interesting mispress of this too that has a Donna Summer song on the B-side, so that's kind of funny. I don't know how that happened. This was actually reissued in 2022 on Mad Butcher as well, so there's still ways to get this. Yeah, this is, I mean, the song, every song on this is incredible, but the song Someday is, I mean, I would say top 5 UK2 songs ever written. Yeah, just outstanding. External Menace, I believe they're from Glasgow, Scotland. And there's gonna be more of this band as we go forward. Okay, so moving right along. We are back to Antisocial. And this is the final Antisocial release of the 80s. And this is the only release that they did with this lineup. So after the last one, Too Many People, Sid would leave, and their singer Sid, and they would get a new singer who is actually a roadie for One Way System. So that's him right there. That's Phil. And he would be the new singer, and this was the only release he did with them. But this is way more straight ahead oi. By this time it's all skinheads. There's no leather jackets anymore. This is definitely more sing-alongy, chanty, more in the oi style. It actually comes with only the original press, I think, has this insert. And again, like the other ones, this has been bootlegged and reissued multiple times throughout the 90s. So this one can be a little tough as well to find out which one is original and not. Again, the color variants are all reissues. There's a gray version and a pink version. Those are both reissues, and these didn't come with inserts either. And again, the cardstock cover on this is the giveaway that for the original press. So yeah, there was actually 4 songs recorded for this. There was a Sham 69 cover of the song What Have We Got that was taken off of this. So it was supposed to be 4 songs, but the 1994 bootleg, they added it back on, and that came in black and red. And the labels on that one are different, so you can tell that one pretty easily, and that was from 1994. The other ones, they have like a, you know, a photocopied sleeve, and they're from around the same time period. And then in 2017, Evil Records also did this one, but they changed the covers around. I think there's very few of them came with the original artwork, and then they changed the artwork for some reason. I don't know why. I mean, this is just iconic to me. I don't know why you'd mess with it. But yeah, so that would be the last Antisocial release on the label and of the 80s. And I think they came back. I don't think they've done any more material, but as far as Antisocial goes, there is this collection that came out in the 90s on Captain Oi. So this is basically a one-stop shop for Antisocial. This has everything that they did in the 80s. Yep, it's got all the releases on there. This has their demo cassette that we talked about that was actually on there, and there's some cool, not often seen pictures of them on here. It has like a little insert. And if you, this was on Captain Oi. I don't know if I mentioned that, but this is I don't know if it's really tough to find. I don't really see this a lot. This is the only time actually I've seen this in the wild, is this copy that I bought. So this is a little bit tougher to find. And I should also mention that the Here Comes the New Punk book I mentioned actually has a really cool picture of them in the with the same lineup as Official Hooligan. These are like outtakes from the photo shoot that they used, and it actually comes with two pretty cool posters also featuring them. There's this other one here. This one's on more of the paper. So yeah, this has some other cool pictures of them. As far as Antisocial goes, I mean, they might be one of my favorite early 80s UK oi bands. Okay, so that is Antisocial. The next one, we are back to Uproar. So Uproar, Die For Me, this is March of 1983. This might be their finest hour in my mind. But again, the back is that very typical Beat the System look to me. Just, I mean, there's so much to look at on this, you know, like just little pictures in the corner and all that stuff, and that ransom note kind of look. Yeah, I mean, this record was definitely a milestone when I finally got my hands on this one. Yeah, classic band. And I think Uproar would end up being Beat the System's, like, they put out the most records on Beat the System of any of the other bands, if I had to guess. Okay, so next up we have another band that we've talked about previously. We talked about these guys in the No Future video. Chaotic Youth, this is another Scottish band. I think these guys are actually also from Glasgow. Could be wrong, I don't think it says on here. But yeah, this is probably, no, it definitely is the most expensive Beat the System record. This one is tough to find. Sad Society. So, as previously mentioned, those Beat the System songs that are on the Total Anarchy compilation, they are exclusive to that. However, recently this came out, and this includes that EP, and it also has all of the, the two songs that were on the Total Anarchy compilation, as well as their one song that was also on A Country Fit for Heroes on No Future. That is the same one that the One Way System song was on that we showed earlier. So this is really cool. This was by the Minnow Punk. I showed this in the No Future video, but I'll just show it again here. Yeah, comes with this little insert with some rarer pictures of them. This guy looks very, very Johnny Rotten there in that picture. And it's got the whole story behind them. These guys actually, they had a chance to get more of a big break. They were supposed to go on a national tour with The Exploited in, I think, 82 or 3. But they couldn't I don't think they had a van, or they had no transportation or something, so they kind of were, that was like their one chance to kind of be more well known, and it just fell through and they ended up breaking up. But they're kind of more of a cult band these days. This actually came out more recently, which again I'll just touch on. That is their demo, and this is their full 81 demo that the song on A Country Fit for Heroes was taken from. And I showed this in the other video, so I'm not going to go too in depth with this, but this is pretty cool. Yep. Okay, so after Chaotic Youth, we are on to our next release, but we are staying in Scotland, and we are back to External Menace. So this was mid-1983. I couldn't find an exact release month for this one, but it was May, June, around there. Again, like the other one, only one original press, and reissued by Mad Butcher in 2022. But the cover is definitely weird. I forget the story with this. I think it was like their producer or something that they put on here. But again, very similar aesthetic with all the little kind of pictures to study on the back. This is actually, We Want to Know is actually the first External Menace song I ever heard, and it's kind of what hooked me on them. So yeah, this is an outstanding record. This would be their last official record of the 80s. They were on a couple more compilations, which actually, I just mentioned this a little while ago, Rot Records, who were kind of known for these punk compilations. There are External Menace songs on both of these. This one has one External Menace, I believe Shock Troopers is on this, which is a great song. Oh no, this has two. This has Coalition Blues, which might be my favorite External Menace song of all time, and Vietnam. And the other, this one has Shock Trooper on it. So there's 3 External Menace songs on these, and that's pretty much all they did in the 80s, which is like mind-boggling considering how good they were. Yeah, so these, and aside from even the External Menace tracks, these 2 compilations in my mind they're more obscure, but they're essential to the UK82 stuff, especially like I was talking about with the meat and potatoes of the scene. Like, these are a lot of the hard-working bands that were kicking around at the same time, but just don't really these days have the following. So yeah, as far as collections for External Menace, there is this Coalition Blues. This has all of their official releases, so this has every song that we just talked about. This is from 82 to 85, and this has all the EP tracks, compilations. And it's got all the information on the lineups. There's some more pictures of them back in the day. This was done by Loud Punk. I don't know, what year was this? 2013, 2014. There's actually another version of this that comes with a 7-inch. I think it was like the first. I think there was live versions on that or something like that. Loud Punk also did this, so this is pretty cool. These are some just really obscure demos from 79 to 84. I mean, some of the actual recordings on this are so rough, and I believe today they mention in here the drums were just buckets, which is like, listening to this song, you can just hear the talent coming through their lack of equipment. Like, Today is such an incredible song, and they just had no equipment, but it's still great. That's how great this band is. So they broke up in the 80s. The original singer passed away. And they reformed, I believe, in the 90s, and they still play today. Not in America, unfortunately, but they still play, or I don't know if they've stopped playing very recently, but they did a lot more material in the 90s than they ever did in the 80s. And there's a CD that's called Pure Punk that was done by Captain Oi, and I believe that has pretty much everything, including demo songs, on it. I used to have that years ago. I don't anymore, so I don't remember exactly what's on it, but it has all the essentials, so it's very similar to this one. So yeah, External Menace, can't say enough good things about them. Great band. Okay, so the next one is a little interesting. The next release never actually came out. It was supposed to be a release by this band, Postmortem. It was supposed to be in mid-'83, around the same time as that one, and it was going to have the catalog number of Post 1. By some accounts, that record was actually produced and made, and Barry Lights pissed off the pressing plant by not paying them, so they never delivered the final produced record. In some books, they say that there were sleeves made, that the record was actually produced, and then I've also read that it never actually got that far, so I don't know what happened. Maybe there's some that are still floating around out there. This record came out a couple years later in '85. This wasn't the record that was supposed to come out. But I'll just show it here. So this band this is very similar to like Potential Threat. If you're familiar with them, it's more like female vocals, but not Vice Squad. This is much more faster, angrier band with female vocals on Regime Records. This is a little more of a pricey one. To me, they kind of sound like if you combine Verruchers and Court Martial from Riot City and put a female vocal over top. It's really cool. I love this record actually a lot. As far as the Postmortem songs that were intended to be released, you can actually find those songs on this, and this was done by the same guys who did that Chaotic Youth 12-inch collection, Vomito Punk, so they did this one. And you can find those two songs on here. And it is Day by Day and IRA. So that is those are the two songs that were intended to be released on Beat the System. This is a really cool thing to have. That Postmortem single is approaching $200, $100, somewhere in that neighborhood. Yeah, so this is just, in my mind, this is a way better option than shelling out the money for that original copy. I mean, you get all these really awesome pictures of them in front of their van. This has the whole story, and there's some differing accounts between the liner notes of this and some of the books that I have, the reference books. Some of them say, I forget which is which, but some of them say the record was actually produced, and I guess the record presumably destroyed the copies after Barry didn't end up paying. So I don't know if there's maybe a handful of them left. Maybe some of the covers still exist. I don't know. That would be really cool if one of those came to light one day. But for now, you can find the songs on here, so that's pretty cool. And I should also mention, there's no singles collection vinyl that came out for Beat the System, but Captain Oi did a CD collection. So like the No Future and Riot City really records, they had those full, or well, not full, but they had those double disc compilations. They also did a CD version of that for Beat the System, and that one includes the two Postmortem songs that were supposed to be on it. So I think that's kind of how this came to light, was when that CD came out. People were like, holy shit, there's two Postmortem songs on here, and then it was, oh, that was supposed to be released but never was. So I figured I'd throw that in there. So technically not a Beat the System release, but definitely relevant. Okay, so with that unreleased single, there was only one more record that was released on Beat the System, and that would be their only full LP that was done, and that was The Uproar and the Lord Said, Let There Be Uproar, August 1983, and this was BTS LP1. So they finally started using a catalog number that made sense on their very last release. There was only one original vinyl press of this at the time. No fancy colors, nothing like that. This again is, I'm like, just look at the back. It's just that same style. Also comes with this inner sleeve that the record would come in, and this has all the lyrics on it. Yeah, this is one of those LPs that, this gets a little pricey too. This is probably between $50 and $100. You'll find this in varying conditions. just outstanding, one of my all-time favorites. There was a CD reissue of this in 1996 on Step 1, and that had all of the previous singles that we mentioned as bonus tracks. And then in 2017, this was finally reissued on Dr. Strange Records, and they changed upward to red. So if you're just flipping through bins at a glance, you see this with red, it's the Dr. Strange reissue. So yeah, this would be their final release, and this would not be Upward's final release, but it was their final release on Beat the System. So with that, we will talk about this last record here. This is also on Vomito, just like the Postmortem and the Chaotic Youth was. So this is Vomito Records out of Spain, and this is pretty cool. It has a fanzine, clipping, has like a little history of some cool unseen pictures. This includes all of their 7 inches that were on Beat the System. It includes their demo from 1982. So there's some, I think most of these songs ended up on 7 inches, so these are different versions of that. And then it has their next 7 inch that came out after Beat the System folded in 1984. And they would kind of change their sound on this 7 inch. And then they did another album after this, which is definitely sort of like One Way System. It's a little bit of a departure from this more noisy, chaotic style that they had at this time. And when I was a kid, I really hated everything that Upward did later, and then I revisited it recently, and actually I kind of it's definitely not nowhere near as good as this, but I have a little bit more of a newfound appreciation for it. It's not bad for what it is, it's just not this. So yeah, that's pretty much the end. There's no, retrospective collections or anything available of all these tracks on vinyl. There's no, they kind of just went out with a whimper rather than with a bang. And that was the end of Beat the System. And that's a very similar story for a lot of these smaller labels. So this is the kind of stuff I really want to start getting more into. And even smaller labels like Inferno Records, I think I'll probably do one. I was actually debating combining this with Inferno Records. But I figured just, for organizational OCD reasons, I would leave it out. And then, again, as with the other videos, I will just again mention all of these books that aided me. All right, so thanks to Ian Glasper and New Rose Publications for going through all the trouble, especially New Rose for helping with the organization of the catalog numbers, because it is a dumpster fire to try to figure out what came out when. So with that, this will be the last record. I'm also not going to really do those crazy long intros anymore. I might do like little intros, but those take forever to make, and I'd rather like to do these a little more often, and the intros just take too long to edit and make. And plus, there's not that much footage or of anything really that was on Beat the System. I think there might be a couple Upward videos of like practice and stuff, and there's a couple pictures and stuff like that, but so I think for brevity's sake going forward, we're just gonna pretty much do like a little tiny intro of what you're getting into and then just jump into this. So all right, that wraps this video up, and we'll see what I do next in another 3 months. All right, so take it easy.